You get that off the screen. You vanished.
Okay, I'm back on, I think.
Yeah.
What happened? Okay, good morning. As we go to the chitas of today, we're holding. What's the matter?
You're in Tanya.
Oh, what's happening this morning? Okay. As we go to chitas today, we're holding the chumash for today as the sixth reading in the portion of the Pasha of Shlach. We are holding the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verse number 17. Vayidaba Hashem el Moshe Lamer, and God spoke to Moses, saying, Dabo b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, v'amayta aleim, and tell them, b'vayachem al haaretz, when you come into the land, Asher ani maybe eschem, which I bring you, shama there. Now she says, when you come into the land, this coming differs from all the other comings in the Torah. For with the others, the Torah says when you come in a singular, kisavai, kisavayu. Over here, it says bevayachem. Therefore, all of them learn a particular law from each other. Since in one of their cases, Scripture specifies that it applies only after the inheritance and the settling of the land. It therefore applies in all cases. But here the word says bevayachem. As soon as they arrived, they ate from the bread of the land. So therefore this coming is different than all the other laws. You know, in general, all the laws that happen in Israel happen only after 14 years, after they conquered the land and they divided the land. But over here, the mitzvah of challah, it was obligated for them to do it right away when they came into the land. Verse 19, when you're going to eat from the bread of the land. Tarimu truma Hashem, you should take a gift, take challah, or from the dough. The first portion of your dough shall be separate. Tarimu truma like truma, take separate a loaf for a gift. Truma is a goyden, like the gift of a threshing floor. Kain tarimu eisa, you shall take from this dough, from the challah. When you need an amount of dough, you're accustomed to kneading in the desert. And how much is that? The measure of an omer per head, shall separate from the first portion. That is to say, before you eat the first portion from it, you shall separate one loaf of the gift for the sake of the Eibishter. Challah is a loaf from French toto, sort of a cake, a round loaf of bread. Ketruma's in which no amount is specified, but unlike the gift taken from the tithe given to the Levite or the Kohen, from which an amount is specified. However, the sages did specify for a householder 1/24 of an eighth of the dough and for a baker 1/48, and that is brought down in the Gemara of Chala. Bereisha shistechem titnu l'Hashem, for the first portion of your dough, you shall give to God truma, a gift for the sechem for your generations. Rashi says, why does this verse stated? It is not already stated in verse 20, because it says the first portion of your dough in verse 20. For this, I understand the first one of the dough. Hence, Torah teaches us from the first part of the dough, but not from the entire dough. Tarimul Hashem Truma, since no amount is specified for the dough portion, you shall give a gift. Should be an amount which can be considered a gift. And if you shall err and not fulfill these commandments which God told Moshe. Now she says idolatry was included in all the commandments, kol hamitzvos, which the community brings a bull as a sin offering. But here the Torah removes it from the category to apply it to the law of a bull for a burnt offering and a he-goat for a sin offering. What does that mean? The Torah is talking about idolatry, or perhaps only one of the other commandments. Therefore, Torah states of all these commandments. We're talking about commandment that is equivalent to all commandments, which is an avera that when God forbid a person does it, it's like if he broke all the commandments. Which just as someone who transgressed all the commandments, casts off the yoke of the Torah, violates the covenant, and acts brazenly. So one who transgresses this commandment casts off the yoke and violates the covenant and acts brazenly. And which would you say is an avera, a sin? That is something like that, and that's idolatry. If you do idolatry, in essence, you are basically a kafir, you're basically denying an entire Torah. So, Diba Hashem Moshe, where did God speak to Moshe that? The first commandment, I am the Lord your God. The second commandment, you shall not have any other gods. So the Torah over here is talking about when a person, God forbid, worships idols. All that the Lord has commanded you in the hand of Moshe to Moshe, for the day that God has commanded you, from then and on, the day to Sechem to your generations. Rashi said, this teaches us that anyone who acknowledges the truth of idolatry is considered as if he denied the entire Torah. A Jew is not allowed to give credence to idolatry. That say, oh, that's also a religion. That's also a faith of God. Chas v'shalom. Because if you do that, you're denying in God. It's not they can't go together. All the prophets, because you're denying in all the prophecies and all the Torah for the day that the Lord has commanded and on. Verse 24, if it caused to the eyes of the congregation, it was committed inadvertently. We talk about some they worship idols, God forbid, inadvertently. So this is like a Yom Kippur offering. The entire congregation prepared a young bull. Shall be a pleasing fragrance for the Lord. And you have to bring its meal offering, v'niska, and its libation, kamishpat, according to its law. And then you have to bring a sid izim, echad achatas, you have to bring one young he-goat for a sin offering. Ash says it because the leaders, literally the eyes of the congregation, this transgression was committed inadvertently, for they, the leaders, the Sanhedrin, erred and ruled concerning one of the forms of service that was permitted to worship an idol in this manner. We're talking about in a situation, God forbid, where the Sanhedrin allowed a concept which they realized later on that it's pashut idol worship. So now the entire Jewish people sinned on their account. So they have to bring a par, and they have to bring not only a par, a ram, not a ram, a bull. I'm sorry. They got to bring also a he-goat. The chatos. Now she says, inting the word chatos over here. It's missing an aleph. The word is missing an aleph because this sin offering is different from all other sin offerings. In the case of all other sin offerings mentioned in Torah, which was brought together with a burnt offering, the sin offering preceded the burnt offering. As it says, he shall make the second one a burnt offering. But this one, burnt offering, precedes the sin offering. And that's why over here it's missing the letter Aleph. So it's secondary. Verse 25, I'll call Das based on the Kohen will bring atonement for the entire congregation. Then they'll be forgiven. Kishgagahi, because they did it inadvertently. And they brought a sacrifice. Ishal Hashem, which is a fire to God. And they brought their sin offering before God on their mistake. Rashi says this refers to the state in the passage 24, namely the bull, which was brought as a burnt offering. And it says here a fire offering, and their sin, which is the second offering, the goat. And the entire congregation, if you remember, this verse is said many times on Yom Kippur. And the entire congregation of the children of Israel and their Gadim and their converts, that lived in their midst, because the entire nation did it inadvertently. That completes the Chumash for today. We go now to the Tanya of the day, which is we're going to complete today the 8th chapter of Shara Yichud Ve'emunah. The Alter Rebbe is explaining the concept of Yichudi Allah, Yichudi Tata. The ultimate that God comes in within the Midas, and through the Yichudi Tata, through it comes within the Midas, he ultimately creates the world, which is, that's why it's called Olam. It's a hidden world. And the revelation that is not revealed, godness is not revealed in the world. The Alter Rebbe explains it in more, the concept of the Esa Sfiris. First and supreme quality. And ranks we regard to the created being. What's his first quality? Is chachma, wisdom. It's called the beginning of all is wisdom. Begins with wisdom. You look in the Targum, Bereshis, in the first word of the Torah, it says Bereshis, in the beginning, Reshis, to mean with wisdom. That the Targum says, B'chachma, with wisdom. Thus, wisdom connotates the first in quality, and the source of all other attributes comes from the concept of chachma, wisdom. Yeah, because wisdom is indeed the beginning and the fountainhead. From all the life force of creation creatures. Because from wisdom derives understanding, bina, and then ultimately das. Umehem nishachas kol hamidus, v'chachma and bina and das. From wisdom and understanding and knowledge comes about all attributes. Shebenefesh ha'maskeles, that from all the attributes that comes from the rational soul, that we have emotions of love and fear, etc. Like love and kindness and mercy, etc., all come from wisdom. The ultimate, the old stem from Chabad, Chachma Bina Das. Kinira Bechush, as we see it vividly, as we see it in reality. Shekotin she'ein baidas, a child that has not yet developed his wisdom, who bekas tamid, gets angrily easily. V'achzari, he's unkind, selfish, fights over everything that belongs to him. Very selfish entity, a child. And he gets very angry for small things, which are unworthy to being loved. He gets angry over it, over a candy, over a little toy. Ein baidas, because why? He lacks the concept of understanding. To love things that are worthy to love. Why? Because you love according to your understanding. That's the way it is. A person loves according to his understanding. And that's where we see it, that a child that's immature loves things that are immature. And he gets very angry over loss of those things, or somebody trying to take away those things, because he's basically an immature person. Thus, the emotion depend on the intellect, and understanding is so much that they derive from them. And from the emotive attributes of the soul, words and letters and thought issue forth. And now we come to the next stuff. We have Chochmah, Bina, Das. We have emotions. And now we come to the garments of it, which is Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. That's the way we think. And that's the way we create letters in our thoughts. And that's the way we speak. For the soul thinks in what it loves. And how to perform deeds of kindness and mercy. So it all comes ultimately from the emotion. And so too the other emotive attributes, they all serve as a source for the words and letters of my thought. And for every thought ba'olam in this world, within every thought in the world, there is clothed some emotive attribute that causes one to think that thought. That's why we have different thoughts. That's why every person has a different thought. Why? Because everyone has a different emotion. We are emotionally connected to different things, or even to the same thing. Every one of us is connected in a different way. So some of us are more intellectual to that concept. Some of us are more emotional. Some of us see the chesed in it. Some of us see the gevura in it, the severity in it. Some of us see the beauty in it. So even in everything that we see, every one of us sees it differently emotionally. And therefore we think about it differently. And that's why the machshava, the thought, this attribute is the verifying force of thought. That's why thought, you learned in the beginning of Tanya, that thought, speech, and action are the levush hanasham, are the garments. Because the way my midas are, the way my chokhmah bina das is, and the way it's expressed in my emotions, that's going to be the way I think. And that's why some people think more with chesed, some people think more with gevura. And then ultimately from my thought comes out words. The thought becomes like the life of the word. So the word becomes the garment to the thought, so to say. Vadibur ultimately mevdei maisa. And then from my speech comes the life to my action. Ultimately giving the charity. So first of all, I have to awaken up my midah of chesed, my attribute of chesed. Through my intellect, I awaken up my midah of chesed. And then I think about chesed. And then I speak to myself, so to say, chesed. And then I give the chesed. For example, as a king who orders his servants to give charity. That's like I have a command. So my emotion, it commands me to think good, to give charity. My thought commands my speech, so to say, to myself, to give that charity. And then it commands my hand to take the money out of my pocket and give it. So the speech, the charitable thought is a result of action. And even when a man himself does some deed which he had thought of doing it, in this instance, no speech is involved. His thought already directed to action. Nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe goes on to say here too, in order for the life force to descend from thought into action, it must pass through an intermediate stage which resembles speech. Even though I'm not speaking, but it's like I'm speaking. The power of the soul and its life force, which clothes itself in this deed. Is absolute nothing in relation to the power of the soul itself and its life force, which clothes itself in the speech of man. They are at each other as a relation comparison of the body to the soul. To the same degree, there's no comparison between the power of the soul and its life force, which clothes itself in speech of man, and the power of the soul and life force, which clothes itself in man's action. Therefore, when the power and life force have descended so far that it's able to clothe itself in action, has already undergone a contraction and a condensation which is far below the power of speech. So that's the meaning. Ultimately, that means everything is relative. Everything is relative. So example, Chachma is the light. What is the vessel? The midas. The emotion is the vessel for the Chachma. Now the emotion becomes the light. What is its vessel? Thought. Now thought comes the light. And what is its vessel? Speech. Now speech comes the light. What's its vessel? Action. And that's the way it goes. Everything becomes an to what becomes its vessel. So therefore, action is far beyond, lower than the concept of speech. Therefore, it's considered a vessel to the concept of speech. And so too, likewise, the distance of the body from the soul is the relationship between the letters of speech to the letters of thought. So in comparison to speech, the letters of thought is considered like oir, is considered like infinite, more spiritual, or aloof. And likewise, the relation to the letters of thought, but to the attribute, to the emotion that created this thought. Without the emotion of chesed, I would never have a thought of chesed. If I had no chesed within me, I would never think chesed. That's why, you understand why some people, since they're more gevura, they don't even think about chesed. It's not even their fault. Because they're thinking critical. Well, a person that has chesed, you meet some people that they don't even think in a critical way. Because their emotion is chesed. They want to do chesed. They don't want to think in it. They don't want to deal with gevura. They don't want to deal with being a critic. Therefore, it doesn't even come to their mind to look at it in a negative way. because they are the motion of chesed. And that's why they don't understand a person who can look at it in a critical way. Because they don't understand the emotion of another person. And therefore, their emotion is chesed. Therefore, the machshava is chesed. Because their emotion is what gives life to their machshava. And since they are more chesed, they have more of emotion of chesed. Therefore, they only think in a positive way. Because their life force to their thought is chesed, comes from their emotion of chesed, which comes from their chachma that wants to have the wisdom of chesed. And so it's like the relationship between the essence, life force of the emotive attributes in comparison to the chachma which gave it life. Shakulan who has seichel, because everything comes from chachma. That this emotional attribute of chesed, where did it come from? It came from my wisdom. For some reason, I have a wisdom. If I have more inclined to chesed, my emotion is more. Why? Because that's the way I think. Because that's where my wisdom is. That's where my understanding is. That's where my das is. And therefore, I have an emotion of chesed. We thus see that the chain of descent from level to level, beginning with wisdom and cultivating with action. Now, this could happen in a second. My wisdom is to do kindness, and therefore my emotion is to do kindness, therefore I'm thinking of kindness, therefore I speak of kindness, and therefore I do kindness. Each level bears no comparison at all, even to the level that immediately precedes it. Emotion cannot be compared to intellect, thought cannot be compared to emotion, and so on. Surely then, there can be no comprehension whatsoever between the lowest degree of action to the highest degree of wisdom. If action is no comparison to the thought of action or the speech of action, then it's surely in comparison to the chachma, the wisdom of action, the wisdom of this chesed. No comparison between wisdom and action. Kol zo b'nefesh adam. And all this, what I just said, is not even talking about the chachma of the Eibishter. All what I just said just now is all about the wisdom of man. This applies to the soul of man. B'nefesh kol habruyim, in the soul of all created beings. Shekala elamas, that's in all the worlds, or yonim v'tachteinu, whether it's the higher worlds or the lower worlds. Shekula ma'chachma hi reishus u'makar hachayis. That ultimately we understand, we can comprehend that everything comes from chachma, everything comes from wisdom. God, however, as we'll soon conclude, is a distance from that degree of wisdom as he is from action. Now you'll understand what God, you can't even call God chachma. And that's why the expression of the Magician Magid, who says, "Mipsari, I can understand it for myself. I can comprehend the comprehension of godliness for myself. If I can comprehend that my wisdom is so far away from my action, there's not even a connection between my wisdom and my action, even though it came from it, but they're so far away from it. Now you go to the Eibishter. Now you say, wow, so now you understand how great, because God is far beyond that, because you can't even characterize God as wisdom even to begin with, because wisdom is alone a limited creation. So this is the beauty, understanding this concept, trying to comprehend, even though we said before, as the Rambam said, it's impossible to comprehend. But maybe from the lack, from the no, you can comprehend maybe what is yes. That's why it's famous. The Gemara says, you don't only understand something from something, you understand something also from what it's not. You can comprehend from what it's not to little what it is. It's surely not like a human being. God is surely above human being. which even a human being can comprehend, that his wisdom is so far away from his action that it's almost there's no comparison between my wisdom, my chachma, to my midas. There's no comparison. There's no comparison between my midas to my thought. There's no comparison between my thought to my speech. There's no comparison in my thought to the action that I do. So there's surely no comparison between my wisdom and my action. There's no connection. There's almost no reality between the two. It's partial like infinity to finite. My wisdom is infinite in comparison to my finite action, my simple action. My wisdom is far beyond that concept. So it's like almost like infinity to something that's finite, but surely God is infinite to any physical thing in this world. God is there's no connection. That's why ani havaya lo shanisi. That's why I am God, I don't change. So too in humanity, in essence, his wisdom never changes in a way. Doesn't make difference what he does. Doesn't change who he is. Also in humanity, same thing. What he does doesn't change who he is. He is who he is, whether he does or doesn't do. Like we say, a Yid is a Jew, whether he is what he does or what he doesn't do, what he accomplishes, that doesn't change who he is. That changes the way he lives, the way he expresses it, but doesn't change who he is. Can be a person that doesn't do nothing and he's still a Yid, because that's what he is. That's a specific subject. I don't know how I got into that. So God, however, as we'll soon conclude, is distant from the degree of wisdom as far as that of the action. From the divine perspective, action and wisdom are humbly equal. Because from the divine perspective, everything is finite. Whether it's wisdom, whether it's action, both of them are finite in comparison to God, who is infinite. So to us, it's like an illusion that wisdom is infinite to our action. It's not. Both of them are finite. Because to God, everything is finite. Because God is true concept of infinity. Because he's above everything. And therefore to him, the concept of wisdom, the concept of action are all ultimately the same exact concept. As the Alter Rebbe will continue in Shem, in his teachings of the Shari Yichud Munah, as we continue to learn this Chitas to Tanya. Midshem tomorrow is Shabbos. I hope that you learn the Chitas by yourself. And today is the 27th day of the month, which is chapter 120 to chapter 134, the 15 Shira Mailes, 15 chapters of the 15 steps of the Beis Hamikdash with David HaMelech, saying gave it for the concept of the dedication of the temple. So it's very powerful chapters, chapter 120 to chapter 134. And Amid Shem, I wish you, first of all, a good Shabbos. And then Amid Shem, we'll see you all on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. We'll continue the Chitas of the day. Have a wonderful and beautiful day, a good night of Shabbos, and have a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos.